So thank you everyone for being here. This is One Art's May reading. Delighted to have you all with us. And if people continue to trickle in, that might happen, then I will let them in. That was an important sentence to utter aloud. So we have 5 readers with us today. And what else? Usually there's some sort of housekeeping to do. So what do I want to say? I've been working on a bunch of workshops, 5 actually at once. And and I just saw Donna make a face. I need to talk to Donna about a future workshop. So there will be another workshop with Donna Hilbert coming up in the not too distant future. And I see Marjorie is with us in the audience. And down the road in November, One Art will be co-hosting an event for the Keystone Poets Anthology of Pennsylvania poets. So more about that in the coming times. But all this will be on the website. So I'll drop links in the chat for it's oneartpoetry.com/readings or /workshops. And you can find out information there. What else? Yes, so the reason in part that I'm mentioning all the workshops and the readings in progress is me learning, which I've learned before in the past, that one of the skills that's not my major strengths is moving people around. It's like a certain type of managerial skill, and it's hard and it's like very labor intensive, and my bandwidth is not as strong for it. So, I feel like I'm in a bit of a scarcity mindset when it comes to time, but that's a long-standing issue. But on the creating on the events side, anyway, you'll probably hear more about this as periodically I talk about sort of like ways to grow the journal and sort of like One Art as an organization, which if anyone wants to email me with tips or ideas about that, please feel free. So that was a long introduction about me and my personal grievances, I suppose. And less to do with today's wonderful reading and our readers. And, thank you for being here. I was going to say on this gorgeous day, which it's actually not, it's raining in the greater Philadelphia area. I don't know about where all of y'all are at, but here it's rain town a little bit, and much needed rain though, so we should feel good about that. What else is important to mention aside from the weather and other niceties? I assure you, I was going somewhere deeply important on this monologue. So as we move along and hear about the weather elsewhere in the country from all of our readers today, I love how I'm looking out the window as if it's going to tell me an answer, but it's not, although I can confirm, yes, that is a purple finch out the window. Okay. This is all being recorded, which is very important, so thanks for bearing with me. All right, well, after the reading, so 5 readers who will each read for approximately 10 to 15 minutes, somewhere in that range. Then we'll have about 30 minutes of community time. That part I am not recording, so everyone can speak freely, and we can discuss, and you can hang out for a while. And yeah, happy to just have banter and sort of an AMA and talk about life and poetry and the nature of the world. And if you have questions for our readers, that would also be lovely. And with that, why don't we get started before I find other tangents to start talking about, because we never know with me. So our first reader with us is Jennifer Mills Kerr. Jennifer is an educator, poet, and writer who lives in Northern California, an East Coast native, this area, She loves mild winters, which I deeply respect, anything Jane Austen, and the raucous coast of Northern California, which one day I will be pleased to see. After 20 years writing and publishing fiction, Jennifer has recently come out as a poet, thanks to supportive editors, teachers, and friends. And you can connect with Jennifer and read her work on her website and Substack, both of which I'll link to in the chat. And Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. And you're definitely one of those encouraging editors for me. Um, I'm actually going to share my first poem was my first poem that was published, and it was published in One Art. So I'll start with that poem. Your name, heavy on my tongue, hard candy that doesn't melt or sweeten, the taste of old pennies in spring water. Once I shared it with others, and you sparkled, floating, dust motes in light. Many women miscarry, my doctor says. Within my silence, a tiny black coffin. Imagining your face at 1, at 10, at 13 anchors me. Then your features fade, sand beneath salt waves, shifting, half seen, a ghost I create to give birth to you, again and again to give birth to you. I'm doing old school with paper. I have to hold on to something. Um, this poem was published in the Inflectionist Review. The first phrase is from a poem by Tess Gallagher. It's called A Revelation of Trees. Suddenly, every oak reveals itself, branches fleeced, gray with cold. Twisted arms hold a shriveled nest, reaching for the dim eye of sun, pleading, forsaken. Two crows tack and spin, black sails flapping above tangled life, wrinkles, veins, threads stitching sky in haunted song. I gather the fallen bones, lichen laced, aged by summer's thirst, holding their promise to burn, to surrender. This poem is a prose poem. It was originally published in the Mackinac Journal. It's about my monster muse, who is my mother. I think we each have a monster muse, someone or some event that haunts us, but is really fun to write about in ways. So this is called Rescue. The windows in that kitchen were black mirrors. I'm 4, I'm 10, I'm 19. Yet my mother, unchanged, seated at the table, gazing at my father's empty chair. Cool glass against her lips, she kisses heat, whiskey spice, a flame behind her eyes, sunrise at the cusp of night. Then she slips out to sea, flotsam or a torn plastic raft, nothing that could carry me. Sometimes she's a burnt tree, skeletal and gaunt. When young, I scavenged for wildflowers from the smoldering ash, my palms blistering. How painful hope was to me then. To be her daughter was like pulling her corpse across miles of ocean, my breath rasping like a dragged chain. For many years, I believed that if I let her go, she would drown.
Mm.
Thanks, Mom. Little does she know that she's passed away now, but she'd be thrilled in her own way to be written about. So that gives me comfort. I've been experimenting with found poetry a lot. For those of you who don't know, found poetry is just taking words or phrases from other poems and mixing them up. Um, in this poem, I used the poetry by Tracy K. Smith and Louis Cernuda, but I also mixed it up with my own words. It's great to do if you have a poem that's not working kind of jazz it up with other people's words or phrases. It's called Blossoms and Blemishes. Cool cascades of calla lilies, pre-dawn air. Beyond my mother's balcony, the scent of rain-drenched acacias. These insistent pavements, spread blue-black, stiff as new jeans. Sequins jitterbug after rain, like haphazard stars. Distance a directionless map. My mother's bruises closer, copper-colored petals, a sap. I wear this path, and our stories an orbiting sonnet, floral, fallen, bearing streetlights caress. This is another poem that's a found poem, but the sources for this were two novels, A Thousand Acres by Jane Smiley and Philip Larkin's A Girl in Winter. I never knew I'd like him as a novelist. I love his poetry, but that novel is blew my mind. So um, the poem is called To Remember My Father Who Left Me. Like an evening journey downstream, waves a dusky pearl, ripples blurred into brightness. Twin planes of water, my remorse, his drinking, breaking toward the bank, mossy edges threadbare, worn by waves. Past the isolated graveyard with grinning skull and ornate angels beaten by weather. Dark fields open like my young self, mists and shadows, a tarnished moonlight, and the expanse of hills fastened by woods, crying a soft greenness. This is a persona poem. I absolutely love reading literary biographies. And so I stepped into the role of the biographer here, wondering why would you want to do such a thing? Um, but I got to the heart of it, at least for me. It's just called a biographer. My mother's song lodged deep within my throat. I travel centuries inside libraries' swampy light to break the corset of inherited silences. Dear Mom, the place I begin each day, digging into women's love letters and archived lives, childbirth, funerals, disease. I miss you, I'm afraid. Their struggles trapped inside hefty books, pressed violets that still hold fragrance. I wish, I ache. All the words my mother never said, never could say, I embrace, riding into the inky tunnel of night, breathing in air, powdery and sweet. I've also experimented with centos. A cento is taking the entire line of another poet's work and then reordering them. I used a lot of poems, so I'm just mention the authors here, all ancient Chinese poets that I used in this cento. So Dao Chen, Wang Chen, Du Fu, Su Manchu, and the translators were David Hinton and Kenneth Rexroth. And if any of you want to know, the actual poems I used, just ask me in the chat. I'll be happy to share those. It's just there's so many. Um, so the cento, the title runs into the poem. Through 1,000 miles of melancholy autumn, I travel an infinite forest, bleakly shedding leaf after leaf. The moonlight shines on white bones, and strange fires gleam through the night rain, scarlet flowers on green hills. Oh, that I could shrink the surface of the world, the fallen cherry blossoms, the inexhaustible river rolling on wave after wave. Painfully cold, a dawn wind thicks the dew. If I shall ever return home so that suddenly I might find you standing at my side, thinking of it can bruise my heart. I am half afraid. Perhaps it is not true that flowers and birds forget deep sorrow in the spring.
Mm.
This is my last poem that I'll share. It's a found poem mixed with my own words, and I drew inspiration from Elizabeth Jenkins' poem, A Bird in the House. Cradle Cage. Today, a yellow bird sings in my mind through the bars, miles away. I was 5 when I buried the canary, trees waving farewell, the sky cut sunlight. God tilted blades to free the tiny corpse, dying and escape. My life an agony of walls, the buried grief of dolls' faces, danger curled by the fire. My mother distilled inside ritual flight, ice cubes clunked into a plastic bowl, like the wooden blocks I played to spell cat and tap and home. Our whiskey-scented kitchen, its growing haze of cigarette smoke, tinged gold by the solitary candle she always lit, a lighthouse inside her clouded heaven. When I buried the canary, I wrote a prayer with chalk upon the sharp-edged slate. Here lies a bird who died, though its high treble remains, carrying my mother's slow, hidden death that I secreted. Shame, a starched gag so tight that tears became song. Thanks, everyone.
Wow, Jennifer, thank you so much for that reading. That was beautiful. A few thoughts that come to mind. I loving the creative entry points that you have for these poems. Um, you'll note some really great feedback in the chat. I liked a lot of what was shared. Um, there's quite a few comments about the beautiful images in your poems, which I certainly agree with, and this language that flows, in such like a lulling and deeply powerful manner. So thank you. That was beautiful. Uh, so next up, we have Terri Kirby Erickson. Terri is the author of 7 full-length collections of poetry, including her latest collection, Night Talks, New and Selected Poems from Press 53. This was a finalist for the International Book Awards and Best Book Awards. Her work has appeared in a wide variety of journals, including American Life and Poetry, Asheville Poetry Review, Atlanta Review, JAMA, Poetry Foundation, Rattle, The Sun, The Writer's Almanac, Valparaiso Poetry Review, First Daily, and elsewhere. Among Terri's many awards are the Joy Harjo Poetry Prize, Nautilus Silver Book Award, Tennessee Williams Poetry Prize, and the Annals of Internal Medicine Poetry Prize, and she lives in North Carolina. Terri, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for being such a kind and supportive editor and human being. And it's so nice to see you, as I said, moving around like a real person and not a photograph. And I want to say, Donna, I love you. Uh, we are buddies and we haven't gotten to meet or talk, but we talk online and stuff. So love you, love your work. And Jennifer, I loved all your poems. They were just stunning. So anyway, the first poem I'd like to read is one that was published in Fabulous One Art. It was a difficult poem to read, and I wanted to send it to a tender place. And I so appreciate you publishing this poem. It's called After My Brother Died in an Explosion. Our mother took up smoking. She would sit by a window cracked by the blast that killed him, legs crossed at the ankles, her auburn hair flowing down her back like a swollen creek. Smoke rose from her lips and swirled around the room like her son's spirit leaving his body to the sound of sirens, the hiss of busted pipes. Days went by when she barely spoke to anyone, kept to her bedroom when people came to call, was comforted by nothing. And all the while she smoked and smoked, her grief raw as a wound, constantly weeping. It seemed as though her will to live disappeared like a child rounding a busy street corner, his mother frantic to catch him before he dashed into the street. And then, at what cost we cannot know, she returned to us. It was like she never left, the only proof of her pain, the sorrow peering through her eyes like a prisoner, crumpled packs of smokes in the trash. This next poem is called Free Breakfast. The Spring Hill Suites free breakfast area was filling up fast when a man carrying his disabled young son lowered him into his chair, the same way an expert pilot's airplane kisses the runway when it lands. And all the while, the man whispered into his boy's ear, perhaps telling him about the waffle maker that was such a hit with the children gathered around it, or sharing the family's plans for the day as they traveled to wherever they were going. Whatever was said, the boy's face was alight with some anticipated happiness, and the father, soon joined by the mother, seemed intent on providing it. So beautiful they all were, it was hard to concentrate on our eggs and buttered toast, to look away when his parents placed their hands on the little boy's shoulders and smiled at one another as if they were the luckiest people in the room. The next poem is called The Letter. Nothing is ordinary, not condensation on a pane of glass, that streak of sunlight, yellow as lemons in the neighbor's backyard. Trees are rustling tender new leaves, and our lawn is as thick as a wool rug. Even the scent of coffee wafting from the kitchen is a miracle. A woman walking her little dog down the sidewalk, its leash as taut as rigging. Yet every house hides something that hurts. Even as we call to one another, good morning, our faces open as a letter lying on a table, the kind that makes our hands shake when we find it in the mailbox, that we read only once. Family vacation. My father in his red bathing trunks and bare feet, his back glistening with suntan lotion liberally applied by my mother, was not the same man who came home tired from sitting at a desk all day when what he wanted to do was move. Slim and wiry, he lived inside his lithe body like ball lightning ricocheting around a locked room. He looked forward all year to summer vacation, loved running over the hard-packed sand with its shards of shell, its swirls of seaweed, and diving headfirst into the waves. He told us once that his father couldn't swim, but was built so heavy and solid he could crawl on the ocean floor like a giant lobster, holding his breath as long as a pearl diver. But Dad was a torpedo in the water, head down, arms churning, swimming so far out to sea, my brother and I were afraid he'd never come back. So when he turned at last and headed for the beach, We sank to our knees with relief, waving as if he could see us, as if we were little lighthouses guiding our father to a safe and sandy shore. And this last poem is called What Matters. It took me about 10 minutes to write it, and it was mostly something that I wrote for myself, but the poem has kind of traveled around and seems to mean a lot to others, and that's the kind of thing that makes us all happy as poets, I think. The poem is called What Matters. What other people think of you, what they say, are burdens no one should carry. Lift a spoon, a cup, things that fit in your hand. Carry on a conversation, pick up a baby. Listen to the wind when it whispers, nothing else. There is no one watching you, no one straining to hear what you say. The present has arrived and you are in it. Your heart is pumping. Your breath moves in and out of your lungs without anyone's help or permission. Let go of everything else. Let your life, handed to you through no effort of your own, be all the proof you need. You are loved. Thank you so much, everybody.
Wow. Thank you, Terry. That was a wonderful reading, extremely powerful. So much of that resonates. That ball lightning image, I love that so much. And also just all these intimate family portraits, but given to us in a way that feels very uh, interesting as far as like the imaginary and how you portray and unexpected. And then I love what you said about the What Matters poem, the way that it was intended to be a private poem and it then sort of turned public and was received well publicly. That's really interesting. I feel like we could have a very long conversation about that alone. So thank you so much for that generous reading. And as you said, it's wonderful to see you in person too, or virtually in person as a
Yes, we're
moving reading.
almost in person.
Yeah.
As close as we can get right now, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is often as close as I get just overall. But it works well for me. These readings it's been a real blessing for me to have virtual spaces. So thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you.
Um, Greatly. Okay, so as we continue on our adventure today, our next reader is Dick Westheimer. Dick Westheimer lives in rural southwest Ohio with his wife and writing companion Debbie. Dick is winner of the 2023 Joy Harjo Poetry Prize, as well as a Rattle Poetry Prize finalist. His poems have appeared in Only Poems, Whale Road Review, Rattle, Gasmius, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, and Minion. His chapbook, A Sword in Both Hands, Poems Responding to Russia's War on Ukraine, was published by Sheila Nagig, and I can put a link in the chat with Dick's website. And I should say all of these poets have books, so I hope you'll consider taking a look around and buying a book. So up next, Dick, take it away.
Oh, I am so humbled by the poets who've just read before me and just how their poems have resonated with me. And I echo what folks have said about seeing Mark not in the flesh, in the pixels, but seeing a moving image of him. And I'm so appreciative of his contributions to the practice of poetry. So from rural South West Ohio, this first poem, What to Do If You're Surrounded by Coyotes on the First Warm Day of Spring. First, raise your head and loose a raucous howl. Don't try to explain. Don't stare at the alpha. Spread your arms like barred owl wings and breathe the musk. Recite Isaiah chapter 43. Forget the former things. Forget the gods. Grieve the creature's winter mange, the raw, abraded flesh, the festered wounds, the fleas. And when they circle, snarl and bare their teeth and reveal their ulcered gums and stinking breath, when you fear the big one going for your neck, concede like you would to a heart attack or a kiss. Don't flee. Recall that fear provoked this myth, that the land is yours. Don't call your friend Steve with his lust for guns and predator's blood. Sing hymns. And this next one was my last poem curated by Mark. The day after everything is cliche. There's a crow on the road on the way to the poetry workshop, and I think I will be completely consumed by cliche today, eaten by guilt, green with envy of those who wear certainty like a cloak of invincibility, sure the earth is flat, that immigrants eat cats, those wearers of red hats and flyers of giant white flags, my neighbor perhaps whose daughter Kay, her brother asked so many questions that the only answer was to point an AK at his own head and shoot. Kay will soon wed. Her dad and I walk each day, talk about his tumor, how he read on the web about a baking soda cure. He's poured 100 boxes of Arm& Hammer into his hot tub and turned up the temp to 106, and I am convinced that this will work. If by work I mean he will die happy, if only because the man Kay marries is good to her, volunteers at the VA helping old men bathe. And what good would it be to my neighbor to know that the earth really is a ball, that the warming world will burn us all, that the man whose flag he flies would never volunteer at the VA, that crows remember faces and bear grudges? Nothing, I could say, will shrink his tumor or be Grandpa to Kay's kids when he's gone. In the beginning days of despots, the tick hounds howl echo up from the creek. It's 3 a.m. and we are asleep, our bedroom window thrown open to the muggy night. For the first time in 40 years, a hound dog chorus rises from the ravine. Locals once ran their hunting pups down in the bottoms most summer nights. The dogs treed raccoons and bawled their baritone yowls until the bead-eyed varmints were brought down by bullet or bow. Pissed as we were at being awoken, there was joy in those sounds, and I didn't much mind the good old boys' trespasses, as I was the newcomer in these parts. But now I hear there are agents on the prowl, and who knows who or what they are hunting down. The dogs keep their noses to the ground. It's their handlers I hear howl. Um, Hunger Games in the Land of Olives and Grapes, a poem revised after a first reading to a Gazan friend. Gaza is a pot empty of gruel, a rubble pile, a womb for bones covered with children's clothes, a chamber of concave chests and broken oaths. Gaza is a dinner plate of ground up bricks and shards of glass, a furnace of mothers' breasts engorged with ash, and babies' tongues dry as dust. Gaza is grizzle stuck in the teeth of generals with bombs and warriors with their greasy palms on their rifle butts. It is a mile-high fence with dishes of lambs and dates and tabbouleh bread piled high on the other side. It is Alexander the Great outside the gates and Battus the Brave refusing to get on his knees. It is senseless men playing brainless games, confusing their lusts and zeal and hungers and rage for people's food and people's praise. Gaza is olives and grapes pulled up by their roots, poets and ink deprived of the page, pita and ka'ik made with no grain, paints and marbles and jumping ropes, alone with no children to play, dapka and dance with no music or shoes, and oud and bazouk torn from their strings, a Palestinian sunbird ripped from its wings. Gaza is my Gazan friend, asking me one more time, now are you ready to say the word genocide? Would you, if it were your child who was bones hung with clothes, your brother forced to his knees, your memory of bread only a knot tied tight in your gut? The rules for writing poetry in the time of Trump. And there's the word mute in here from the Greek Mayan, to be shut of the mouth. This is the time of the hand that covers the mouth, the teeth that crack to the root, the tongue parched from drought. This is the time to shout, to split the parched lips so raw that the blood of the ancestors oozes out. This is the time to bite the hand that covers the mouth. What silence will you break with your wild and precious pen to make the once blank page the reason they will take you away, throw you into the dark where only that dangerous poem you dared to write will survive? What perfect metaphor will expose the regime to a Klieg light? Will you unmute yourself? Will I spit on the hand of mine that covers my own mouth? Will I eat the rotten meat of the dungeon cell, drink the piss I collect in the cup, scratch my skin so raw that the words which bleed onto the page are worth the gods writing on the wall behind the firing squad? And finally, I can't leave the room without a lighter poem. Let's call it a love poem, just for categorization's purposes. The fig, the firefly, and what we carry. This is a time for a child's hand to hold mine, to not fear the flesh that shrivels like a fig in autumn, the time to caress the bleeding, bruised skin, thin as the skin of an onion. Open a bed to two old lovers whose hands intertwine like recollection, like lemon peel, whose probing fingers open a door, their time-lined palms, waning moons that unfold one and the other, like splitting the fig of their tender places. They savor the seedy, the sweet, forgetting that one will die before their lust does, and the other will carry it like a child carries a firefly in his cupped hands, trusting darkness can be illuminated by such a tiny light. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you, Dick. So, this is why despots historically fear poets. Our country is just not wise enough, luckily, to worry initially right out the gate, it seems. Although, I'm sure many have already seen the news that they may finally succeed in at least temporarily getting rid of the NEA and probably the NEH, and they'll take a little shot at, I always get the acronym wrong for the library and museum one. But you know, we'll all fight back on that. So I have a good feeling there. But with Dick's poems, you know, I think the intensity and sort of fieriness, uh, and just there is some viciousness in there. You know, there's a lot of fight, and yeah, you know, that's not the person that you imagine. You know, talking to Dick, comes across as a very gentle, mild-mannered person. So yeah, you know. Anyway, I'm just gonna circle back to really, there's reason to fear poets, you know, but we're not the people that go down easy at the end of the day. Um, so thank you, Dick, for your important work and bringing the intensity. Next up, we have Anne E. Michael. Anne E. Michael lives not all that far from me in eastern Pennsylvania. Her latest collection is Abundance/Diminishment. Her book, The Red Queen Hypothesis, won the 2022 Prairie State Poetry Prize and is author of Water Rights from 2012 and 6 chapbooks. She is a hospice volunteer, which is important, intense work, a writing tutor, and a chronicler of her own backyard, which I appreciate, who maintains a long-running blog, which I can drop a link to in the chat. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here, and pleased to see so many fine people willing to listen to poems, because we got a lot to say, right? I'm really appreciate Dick's movement into the political, but that's not something I do a lot of. I do think sometimes we can be ornery and contrary to society just by being artists. So I'm kind of gonna go with that. So this first poem is called Echo Shadow. I'm gonna read a number of poems first from a manuscript I'm shopping right now, um, which is temporarily called A Fine Strange Thing. In the shared pool of our memory, she is the younger sister, and I am a shifting cloud reflected. The water blue because of sky, and she is blue-eyed, and I also. We switch sides. One of us is taller, but we take turns. To take turns is fair. She is more fair than I, but we're us. You girls, everyone says, we are they. I was certain the memory was my own, but there she treads water or splashes in my puddle. She sounds like me, or the other way around. One of us echo, one of us shadow. On the cement sidewalk, buckled, cracked by roots of old sycamore trees we never planted. When I stumble, we skin our knees. We pick each other up. Here's a short poem for a young person who I met fairly recently. That broken mirror. That broken mirror won't be the same once you've mended it, though being the same wasn't the point, was it? Sharp shards can injure, but that part about the 7 years bad luck is someone else's outdated fear. You can live lovely within the 3 or 4 dimensions of your own heart, however long it takes you or however far you must go. Maybe in the shattering you see yourself with many eyes. Maybe 2 of them are your mother's, looking at you, not looking back. Change is the wild, roaming engine of what happens, and you can look deeply at the edges of everything. So many facets to reflection. My father died during COVID, although not from COVID, and my mother is very aphagic and has had a couple of strokes, so I'm in that phase of my life. I wrote this poem before my father's death. And Jennifer, this has a Chinese poet, Chang Tzu, mentioned in it. It's called Familiarity. The sage Chang Tzu says, when you step on your parent's foot, you know you are already forgiven. My father's no sage, just an old man beginning to die. Unable to smile at his pain, he smiles at us, at my mother holding his hand, at my sister holding her anxious thoughts. He smiles at her fears, and they seem translucent, like those slides projected on the wall, pictures of our childhood, hovering near, colorful but not crisp. And instead of our rounder faces and smaller forms fading, he is fading, sallow among the sheets, white screen, blank wall. And he's forgiven me in advance for all the injuries I may do, treating me with gentleness, though I've trod upon his foot again and again and again. So, and so again, because I work with hospice, I guess death's on my mind a lot, but you know, I'm a poet. It's life, death, love, birth. I don't know. This is called Lifespan. And I guess it's sort of my contemplation about that. Isn't it a fine, strange thing how little information we can glean about our future, surely numbered days? How many snowfalls, how many restless nights or long drives to how many friends' homes? Is it possible to count the scores of leaves that fell in each of the witnessed autumns? Can these be measured? The light sun shower that startles midday, fox leaping like a lamb in the meadow, someone's recording of Rigoletto, distantly woven into the drone of a diesel engine. We are born and find that we live in a world of water bears and wolverines, tire irons and railroad tracks, shale, gas, stem cells, sycamore trees. We categorize, we kiss, we weather our own climate, mark out our joys. We span everything resembling a ravine, pleased with our ingenuity. And then comes death, which, like the hermit thrush, has whistled all along, half hidden, as though it knew a fine, strange thing. And this is a very new poem I wrote for, it sounds like it's for one specific friend, but it's sort of a combination. In a cafe, she told me on the other side of loss, there can be days mostly good. There is still grief and difficulty. There are many other sides to loss. In retrospect, we find our decisions questionable. What if only? Steam rises from her cup of espresso, molecules that swirl, ascend, escape. Though physical pain may be past, it is remembered by the entire body, as is whatever has wounded us in other ways, heartbreak, betrayal. She looks up at something that isn't in this room. She evades my eyes. We learn to look away sometimes. It keeps us from breaking into tears. And I have two short poems, which are a little lighter in mood. I think sometimes we need to do that. This one, I spent a a week in Spain at a writer's residency, and I met a young woman who was doing installation art of very peculiar, and she oh, it's very modern, you know, she does installation art, then she takes videos of it, then she uploads it to Instagram and, you know, all kinds of whatever, TikTok, I don't know. But anyway, I thought one of the things she was doing that I thought was really cool was she would take she would do a lot of work with seaweed. She grew up in the shoreline of California, and she plays with seaweed a lot. So in one of her installation pieces, she dresses herself in seaweed and wanders into the ocean. So I'm calling this She Walks in Seaweed, and it's after George Gordon Lord Byron. So it's a little tongue in cheek. She walks in seaweed as one might in cloudless climes where air is warm. And should you see her tanned and bright along a wild and rocky shore, turn toward the waves, wade to her knees, and peer at all the tumbling there, the mass of pebbles, sand, and weeds that shift and flow like locks of hair. You may well ask what arts she knows, as through the kelp-thronged sea she goes. So my little nod to our predecessors. I'm going to finish with a very new poem for my, well, I guess it's for my daughter. She isn't mentioned in it, but she is a beekeeper now in the desert, in the high desert of New Mexico, which I thought was like, really? So this is called Desert Apiary, and it may not be finished. I'm probably going to tweak it some more, but thank you for listening anyway, for in its rough state. Desert Apiary. Yes, there are bees in the desert, in the dry mountains, among ponderosas, bees nourished by blossoms of prickly pear, agave, mallow, lupin, bees amid milk vetch and penstemon, stirring wallflowers, orange petals, humming in the rabbit brush. The beekeeper, therefore, must know the general order of bloom times, when to supply more feed or keep water flowing in drought. Winter nights, the air is so cold, each hive huddles into a slow-moving sphere. If the wind dies down and you place your ear to the box, you can hear them whispering the epic stories of their survival to their queen. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Anne. And that last poem, very apt title, Desert Apiary. I love it. That's such a cool poem of place, is sort of one of my initial takeaways. Is I feel like that's a challenge, but it really makes you think. I mean, if you know a little bit about beekeeping, then it just instantly gets you wondering. You're like, how would you do that in that environment? So like your mind is already going, which is really cool. And then you do an appropriate amount of hand holding there. But there's just, oh, your poems are so good. Just thinking about hospice and palliative care and how important that work is. And for me, like it's a really good place to come to poetry because you have like a deep knowledge of the human life cycle, of which not all of us are really built to actually do that work. I've known a few hospice and palliative care workers, and I definitely have known some that have burned out, which I know is rather common. So it's important, admirable work, and certainly the stuff of poetry. And I loved your reading, so thank you, Anne. Our pleasure to have you with us today. So finally, last but not least, we have Kai Coggin with us. Kai Coggin is the inaugural Poet Laureate of Hot Springs, Arkansas, and a recipient of the 2024 Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship for her project Sharing Tree Space. Kai does so many cool different things, and I just, really, I'll put links in, but I think you'll be excited to see. Um, this is me interrupting my own telling of Kai's bio as an aside that people ask me like, how do you do all the things that you do? And well, if you see what Kai's doing, you'll be like, well, this is kind of next level. So aside from this poet laureate project, Kai is also the author of 5 collections, most recently Mother of Other Kingdoms from Harbor Editions. Kai is also a certified master naturalist. I was just going to confuse that with master gardener because that's what we have here in the Pennsylvania area. A K-12 teaching artist in poetry with the Arkansas Arts Council, an interchange grant fellow from the Mid-American Arts Alliance, and host of the longest running consecutive weekly open mic series in the country, Wednesday Night Poetry, which is obviously laudable. Coggin was awarded the 2023 Don Monroe Leadership of the Arts Award for Visionary Service, the 2021 Governor's Arts Award for Arts and Education, twice named Best Poet in Arkansas, which is impressive, as we can agree. Her fierce and tender poetry has been nominated 9 times, at least for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. In 2022, received a nomination. Rumor has it that 10 of Kai's poems will be sent to the moon in the Lunar Codex project, and I believe this is not the only one art poet who has poems that were being sent on that project. Kai's poems have appeared in Poetry, the Academy's website, poets.org, Prairie Schooner, Best of the Net, Cultural Weekly, I'm a big fan, Solstice, About Place, which I love, Sinister Wisdom, Lavender Review, and many other journals. Kai is also editor-at-large at Swim, which just does terrific work, as well as possibly the best promotion of Lit Mag and their contributors that I've seen just overall. So Swim only poems rattle. There's a few that just go really strong in their promotion impressively. Kai is associate editor at the Rise Up Review and serves on the board of directors for the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival, which I didn't even know about. She lives with her wife in a peaceful valley, which I've heard story of and sounds lovely. And let me send it over to Kai, and I'll put a link to her website in the chat.
Thank you so much, Mark. I just want to say you are such a sensitive and attentive literary citizen, and it's really neat to just, meet you in person and see you and hear how closely you listen to everyone's work and how you put it onto yourself and reflect back your heart. It's just such an organic experience to be here with you and the space that you're curating. I want to thank all the other poets. I've been deeply moved by all of the facets of the beautiful work that you're sharing today, and also been moved by seeing people in the audience, crying and smiling and just lighting up the chat. So it's been a really beautiful space this afternoon to share with you. I'm going to start by reading the poem that was the most read poem in January for One Art. I wrote it on November 6th, the day after the election, and it was published at One Art, thank you, Mark, on Inauguration Day. And Mark did something special. He let me record myself, do an audio recording, and figured out how to do all of that so that whoever clicked the link could also hear me read the poem. And so he did some fancy tech work and just made it happen because he's magical like that. And so I'm going to start with this poem. It's called I Am My Own Country Now. I am my own country now. I am seated at the very bottom of myself at this time of highs and lows, ebbs and flows, moving through colors of emotion with no wind at my back, waiting to see if I can again pull myself up from the depths of defeat. here I am, borderless inside myself, surrounded by a country that no longer dreams it can dream. I am my own country now, patriotic only for my own quiet tenderness, a citizen of loss and finding again a reason to hold on. The capital city of my heart sparks a little flame on the hilltop of my soft body, and I am trying to find again a reason to stand up for the vision of freedom I held for us all, to light the way somehow through all the impending, unabridged darkness. I am my own country now. My neighbors pushed a lotus back down into the mud when we were so close to the surface, when we were at the cusp of breakthrough, when we could almost see her iridescent petals reflecting the sunlit stars blushing with sweetness, now lost in a poisoned swamp of collectively stepping backwards. I am my own country now. I have taken the stars from the old flag and hung them from my eyelashes, left the red, left the stripes, left the scars, left the blue empty night square there as some long lost pinpoint of progress. I am my own country now, and here the shores of my hands are slowly opening again from the fists of this, knowing the shapes of new truths. I am the only homeland I know. No one can govern my life. No man owns my body, my choices. I am free. I am free. I am free, even if I die in that freedom. I am my own country now, an individual revolution. I threshold my collarbones to greet first the small tender ones, the vulnerable green, the supple lichen and silent mosses, the sapling sycamore and autumn redbud, the black-capped chickadee, wood thrush, and squirrels, the swirling colors of my koi fish rippling outward their dances, my 2-year-old niece, Luca, smiling down a yellow slide into my arms, my gaggle of queer teenagers I bring into the forest, leaving poems as breadcrumbs home. My sweet little black dog, frail with age, who wakes me at dawn to remember the sun rises. My wife, too, defiant with hope, fiery with love, building her new citizens. We populate ourselves with those who can hold us and who we can hold, landlocked together in a country all our own. We chop firewood together, 2 axes splitting hard wood for winter, whatever cold and bitter may come. We cold plunge naked into our backyard pond, fresh and freezing again as torrential rains answered droughts. We dig our fingers into cold, dark earth and drop red tulip bulbs into the soil, blanket them up again with the promise of spring, wrap ourselves too in that promise. We will stay close to our land, to the trees, to our small circles of love. I will stay close to the poets, hold our words as light. We are our own country now. Whew. So that poem kind of came out all in one right on that day after the election when it felt the world was lost. And you know, it is getting lost more and more day by day, but we still hang on. We still find the joy. We still find the light in each other in spaces like this. And I devoted 2 of my last books to battling this regime. My book Incandescent was written during 2018, and that whole time. And then my book Mining for Stardust took place during the pandemic and that insane time where we lost so much and we're in such a battle for our country. And now I don't want to give him any more of my poems. I don't want to feed that darkness anymore. So I've really leaned into survival by wonder and the revolution of tenderness. And so my latest book, Mother of Other Kingdoms, is about that life. It came out with Small Harbor last Earth Day in 2024. I'm going to share a few poems from this. This first one is called Clutch, after Diane Seuss. I drive to a playground and just listen to them laugh. Watch as they spark conversations with each other, melt inside at imagination leading and questions not far behind. They glow outside of me, and my womb is an empty field of bleeding hearts. If there is truly the taste of regret stirred into this poem, it is warm milk leaking from my full breast into nothing's mouth. It is my arms formed into cradle, rocking no one back and forth. My lips mouthing silent songs, lullabying goodbyes to who was never born into hello. I drive to a playground, walk toward the whimsy of their day, sit on a small rusted horse on a fat metal spring and sway like a ghost. This is the lonely road of regret that leads to the grass underfoot of ache, the sigh of tomorrows empty of growing, the cycles of my uncreated children still sitting somewhere as stardust, hovering over me, waiting for the clutch of my hand to break through the sky. This is called Thirst. For Colocasia esculenta. The master naturalist in me tried to use the Latin names for all the different species and things that I wrote about. And it's a difficult practice to learn how to say all those things, but I think I'm doing okay. Thirst. This morning's wonder is brought to you by the way an elephant ear can hold a drop of water, as if in a wide green cup held in its own sentience. How it sits on the leaf in a perfect globe, unflinching in its wholeness, a sphere of light catching an early slant of sun rising. The drop does not roll away, does not disappear into the chlorophyll of it all, just holds steady in the elephant's impermeable insistence. Who notices these moments but the poets? Who takes the time to write lines of the way light shines through a single drop of water poised there on the morning leaf? Who sings the songs of these unheralded miracles but us minstrels, scribbling away in our quiet rooms, mumbling in our lonely corners where we pray in poems that these miracles never cease to find us, our eyes and hearts open, thirsty for a single drop. Since we're on Zoom, I'm going to read a poem that was published in The Night Heron Barks. And that first poem, Clutch, was published in Prairie Schooner. This is called I Screenshot a Woman on Zoom. Because while I read my poems aloud, her box is like a painting. Her virtual window is some other world I want to peer into and hold. A new ekphrastic there, living, still life. Renaissance mouth rose dusted with color. Skin porcelain like a moon waxing, and her delicate hand resting behind her long neck, thin forearm draping pale against the black of her sweater, elbow resting on unseen knee, such softness from another era entirely, such sincerity in her languorous gaze, the orchids and white roses huddled from winter, greening at her shoulder, safe in her space. I want to hold this stare simply for the unfolding art of her, for the way I am sure she never sees herself, a reflection of anonymous grace. And lest I forget what first caught my eye, the thick brown golden braid hanging over her shoulder, half undone, falling free, but the three parts still holding on, untied, a suggestion of wildness, horse-like, an untethering, loose, long, and slowed down. Perhaps she was in the middle of undressing the day, and remembered a poetry reading on Zoom, a chance to stare softly into windows, peer into other worlds, walk through a gallery of light. And that really happened. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just, it was a painting. It was a painting in this little Zoom square. And I could not, I don't even remember the rest of the reading, but I was like writing while the reading was going on. I was not paying attention and I was performing. So, forgive me. But when the muse strikes, it strikes. This is called Tender and Ache. Shout out to the bees and the beekeepers. Tender and ache for Apis mellifera. Tender and ache. I am an exposed bloom, a dandelion head with almost every wish blown away, still standing in an empty field with hope of fruiting a dream. Can you see why I mother every possible thing? Why the world becomes my womb and my hands a desperate sanctuary? I rescued a bumblebee from the greenhouse. I rescued a bumblebee from between the window pane and plastic sheeting of the greenhouse. A big bear of a bee, fuzzy and stunned, on the brink of untimely death. Who knows how long he waited for rescue? I cupped his slow body in my hand and walked out to the lilac tree laden with blooms and laid him inside a cluster of heavy scented petals. If you die, at least die happy inside here, I said to him. And his weakened bee arms clutched around the soft white flowers as though he was hugging them so tightly, and then stillness. I checked on him every hour while I gardened, and in a few hours he buzzed by me on his way to the lilac. I'm alive! A heavy song of thanks, a flight line of gratitude. This is how I mother. I rock the smallest species to sleep, lullaby our deepest human apologies into their innocent ears. That same day, 5 million honeybees being shipped to Alaska to pollinate orchards on ice shelves were rerouted by Delta Airlines. They waited on a hot tarmac in Atlanta for hours. Hotlanta, record-breaking heat, the Weather Channel meteorologist joked. The bees died in droves, lifeless yellow-black piles, bodies by the crateful, 800 pounds of dead honeybees, an oversight, lost in the machinery of luggage and transit, moved and left to swelter and starve. 5 million bees, and no lilacs to save them, no open hands, no sweet-petaled embrace, no song of forgiveness whispered into their golden honeyed hives, just the tragic end of 5 million precious pollinating lives. Tender and ache, my mother nature heart breaks into 5 million pieces. I stand in a field and buzz with morning. No choice. Since the Supreme Court land grabbed our bodies back to 1973, I've been searching for wombs inside other lives, asking if they know they have more freedoms than human bodies who can carry a child. I scream inside the deep wells of certain flowers, purple columbine, golden bells, red hibiscus, a floating white lotus, all with their impervious blooming, their wildness, their capability to wither at the whim of wind. I Google female sex organ of a flower and laugh at the irony of the word pistil, how a pistil in the flower kingdom carries an ovary and a stigma that has no shame, but in the human names, an ovary has the stigma of men's desires and a pistil has less regulation than my womb. An AR-15 assault rifle in a classroom has more autonomy than the little girl it just blew bullets through. My heart keeps breaking at this country. I plead for light into the 1,000 faces of a mammoth sunflower, and they bow their pitying heads. They plead and plead, and they set 1,000 suns. I sit on my deck among the mourning doves cooing in the pine, and I too mourn what I thought was mine. This body, this skin and cells, this flesh, this bone. I am beyond mothering. No, my body will never home or vessel a child, but this red state will bleed redder still with the trigger band signatures of these scheming leaders enforcing an unholy law that strips us all of our dignity and ability to do what is best for our own damn bodies. I scream into my valley, and my mountains scream back. I clip my fingernails, and these little crescent moons ask me about ownership. Which cells of mine have been sold to the highest bidders? Which organs no longer do my own bidding? In 2 weeks, I will become Auntie Kai to a little girl, a niece who I cannot wait to meet, a sweet life who I've already met in my dreams, a new baby girl born into a world where she has more protection in her mother's womb now than she will when she comes out. Little girl, what is this world we have shaped for you when you have no choice but to be born into it? And I'm going to close with a poem about figs, just as a hat tip to Dick and to all the other beautiful poets tonight who have ended in beauty and still said the hard things. We have a tremendous responsibility as poets to record what's happening, all the beauty, all the joy, and whatever you lean into, keep leaning and do not stop writing. Amber, for Ficus carica. It's golden hour in our valley, and I walk through late summer's dry grass to our fig tree, peek under yellowing leaves in search of the heavy sweetness hanging purple and thick. Like the smallest leather punching bags, I find them, one by one, ready, weighted with their honeyed song, rouged with the bruising of being made ripe in the shortening days. There is no tug needed from my fingers as I find each laden fruit. Each fig waits to fall into my hands. Through their soft skin bottoms, tiny amber droplets of candied nectar harden in the crisp autumnal breeze. And when I hold one up against the backdrop of the setting sun, a halo of amber light hugs the shadowed underbelly, sticky and plump in my palm. Is anyone else noticing this level of intrinsic beauty right now? Who else is holding a fig up to the sun, caught in the amber droplets of decadence, radiant with heliotropic breath? I must name this sweetness as the world burns, must hold it in the memory of words. I bring the supple handful up to my love, this bounty of palpable pleasure, 3 for her, 3 for me. We bite into their supple dark flesh, suck and crunch the tiny seeds, rush of honey, natural sugars, textures of collapsible summer rain, an earth of seasons held in a silken bag, like tasting each other again for the first time. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to all the readers, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, One Art. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kai. Unbelievable. Just stunning. So I have so many thoughts. Very, very much blown away. As the world burns. I've written that note to myself a few times, sort of like, what are the things that we do as the world burns? And it still matters, you know, like everything we do still matters. Because I very much believe that we can preserve a world worth living in. I found myself surprisingly falling on the side of optimism in a way that maybe feels like a tiny bit foolhardy at times, but you know, humans are very innovative, and I do kind of trust that we'll somehow get ourselves out of this one, because we've done it before, and that goes for AI, and that goes for, you know, the Trump quasi dictatorship, which you know, will be official, I suppose. I've heard someone point out that, you know, that line might be considered crossed if, say, the Supreme Court Justice Roberts, you know, if he drew sort of a red line in the sand and it was crossed, that then we'd officially be in kind of a low-key dictatorship. Um,
Feels pretty high key to me already. You know, with everything. I mean, we're living in one. There's not really any
yeah,
denying it.
yeah,
We're under tyranny. We're here, but
yeah.
we're
I mean,
still, you know, surviving because that's what we do. We're going to keep, you know, nature. We are nature, and nature continues to survive. We are a part of nature. And what you just said, Mark, kind of reminded me of this quote that I've been leaning on lately, and it's by J. Drew Lanham, and he's a writer. He was a Genius Grant winner, and he's a birder. And he said, "Joy is the justice we give ourselves." And that right now, in this time of such darkness, and like, you know, we've got to write about all the bad things and the horrible things, but you know, we can see all of these atrocities and everything that's going on, and allow them to embody us and live in our bodies and grieve those things. But we also have to make room in our bodies for joy and for wonder and for beauty and for love and for, you know, all of these different experiences that make us human. All that shit's going to keep going, but like, you know, so many of the poems today reflected our solitary experiences and what we strive to bring into ourselves, you know. And especially Anne's work was so poignant for me, thinking about hospice and death, and you know, the fleeting. And so joy is the justice we give ourselves. No one else is going to give it to us. So
wow,
look
yeah.
for it, find it. And when you can't find it, I mean, when you start looking, it's everywhere.
Keep
Start with
going,
the
guy.
birds.
You can tell this way better than I can. I love it. I want to give one compliment on your poems, and then let's keep talking. I was trying to picture this image of like what would happen, because there's these moments where I feel like you have like a it's like a mic drop in a poem, and then somehow it just keeps kind of barreling on. And I was trying to picture sort of like an apt metaphor for this, and none of them really made any sense. I was sort of like, it's like a bullet train that has lost the need for brakes. Like, doesn't really.
Wow. Thank you.
I'm
I don't know.
trying, but it's hard to get a handle on. So, for a moment, one of your roles that I love, if I have this right, is, are you part of the forestry department now?
No, I'm actually a volunteer ranger with the National Park Service. And so
That's
my
it.
project, Sharing Tree Space, I partner with the National Park here at Hot Springs National Park. And the rangers come with me on hikes that I take in the national park with a group of queer kids, like queer high school students. And if I would have had the natural world when I was growing up in Houston and coming to terms with my identity, I think nature would have helped me so much. And this book is all about like how much nature has made me a different person, and appreciating the beauty in nature and seeing myself in it, and going into that microcosm world and looking at a bee or looking at a beetle. I found a monarch caterpillar on one of the flowers yesterday, and I knew that it was a monarch caterpillar, and I moved it over to the milkweed. And so that sort of attention to that microcosm that's always going to exist in nature all around us, it kind of grounds me and allows me to be stronger and more present in the macro. You know what I mean? Because wherever I go in the world, I can go find a tree
There
and I
is
can
that.
look at it and I can, you know,
There's that
so
empowerment of
giving,
naming, nicknaming the
yeah,
world, and knowing
yeah.
knowing like what goes where.
And so giving these kids that escape too, that they can go to and they can heal and they can, you know, write a poem under a tree and just be themselves and be called by their chosen name and their pronouns. And these transgendered kids in Arkansas, you know, it's a lot, and it's dangerous for me to be the person that I am as a mama bear to these kids, but I'm not going to stop. And so I am free, even if I die in that freedom. You know, that's where I went with that poem, that first poem. You know, I had to really just claim that space because I'm not going to stop doing the work that I do. Just like Dick isn't going to stop writing those fiery political poems. We are who we are.
Exactly right. Dick, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I thought about that quality, the metaphor for the quality you were noting in Kai's poems, which is, sometimes I feel like a diver. I'm going down, and I finally, at the end of the poem, come up for air and take that great gasp. And what Kai has the courage to do is to take that breath and go down to the bottom again and keep looking around and seeing if there's something else, which I really admire.
I
That
admire your work, Dick. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot coming from you, sir.
Yeah, I mean that's just that's a courage that I've not yet developed yet to not take the first exit off the highway, as it were.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, I love that notion of joy as the justice we give ourselves. It's out there. We must, I have to embrace it. And part of writing poetry is sort of dissipating for a moment the tension that the regime, and Mark, I think it was you who used the word regime, um,
Wasn't me
imposes on
first,
it.
actually, but I do use it in my newsletter
Yeah,
for updates about the Trump regime.
I definitely use it.
It's an official term, too. I mean, for
Or the
regime.
tyrant, the dictator, whatever.
What are other thoughts? Poetry, life, questions for our readers about life and poetry, how to move forward in the world in a way that is, functional and I
I,
don't want
I,
to say productive, just, good, atypical forms of resistance. I've been working on that.
I'll throw out something that I think speaks to the poems that folks are reading, like Anne's, that are not overtly political, which is I spoke to a poet friend of mine. He's a Mexican recent citizen, scared as hell about his, you know, we do have a sequence of first they come for already. First they come for the green card holders, and then they come for the student visas. And, he's pretty confident that next they'll come for the naturalized citizens if they're brown enough um, and scary enough to the regime. And I asked him why he thought poets were often targeted by regimes. Even ones who are not writing political poetry. And it's because, they are out of the control of the regime. Poets respond to something else, and that the essence of their work is big T truth, and they can't have somebody else telling a big T truth. So I think love poems, poems about hospice, poems about all of these other things are 99% as political, or maybe 101% as political as ones that are overt and fierce.
Agreed.
They are to the tyrants, it doesn't matter what you say if you're telling the truth.
Absolutely. It's the truth is the most terrifying thing there is to a tyrant. And so we can tell that truth.
They also don't like being laughed at.
They don't like being laughed at.
I
And
wish
yet
I
they
had.
are so laughable
Mm-hmm.
and not in the good way.
No.
I
And,
wish
and
I could
Mark,
find the something that Nabokov once wrote about Hitler, and he used a word that he's famous for, Putschlust, which he finds to be a characteristic of all totalitarian regimes. And it means something ridiculous and disgusting and laughable if it weren't so appalling. And we need to have that out there, but I can't find it right now.
I enjoy this reading so much I can never handle the chat and listen at the same time. So I would have liked to have been quoting lines that I love and praising, but I I am not a double tasker. So
You know what your quotes were, Donna? Your tears.
yeah, I was so
Your
moved.
tears and your heart and your eyes, and that was shining through.
Thank you. I think I was told so much as a child to stop crying or you'll get something to cry about or
Oh God.
whatever. That, once I had my autonomous life, I like, nobody's going to tell me to stop crying. When I'm
Right.
moved, that's what I do.
It's beautiful. Thank you for your tears. They nourished us like our seeds under the water.
Boy, Donna, I identify.
Yes. Well, thank you for, everyone writing from their hearts and telling the truth. Oh, it's everything right now.
Mhm.
And,
My wife often reminds me of a quote by the artist and philosopher Nicholas Roerich. And he said, "Beauty, beauty, beauty, even with tears in your eyes." And that's kind of what we do as poets also. Beauty with a capital B. I have it tattooed on my arm.
oh, look at that.
I love
So
it.
that everything I write,
Because
ends
that's what she
in
walks in.
beauty.
Before she walks in seaweed, she walks in
Walks in
Right.
beauty.
Exactly. We're all
The-
standing on so many shoulders as poets, and we
Absolutely.
stand side by side and on shoulders, and then we also reach a hand to the new ones and inspire the new ones. So we must be brave and we must be true.
As Zagayevsky said, poems from poems.
Mm.
Always this, what is it? How does it go? Poems from poems, songs from songs. Always this impregnation. I mean, I'm leaving out a word. On the other side of the river, the armies. I will screw it up, but you know the poems, I'm sure.
And not to get too, it's not even self-congratulatory, it's you all congratulatory that, we have these three legs of the stool here, the curators, the conveners, and the poets. And some people, they're all three, but each of us is such a part of the ecosystem, but especially the debt that we owe to the curators and conveners.
Yes,
Those
definitely.
spaces.
without an audience, we don't get very far. Although my one of my audiences today was my sister. She's not on anymore, so I'll say this. She's like, my sister goes, "Ooh, 2 poems about me." So yeah, you never know what your conveners, what your audience is going to get out of it. Maybe just a little bit of like personal ego satisfaction.
Well, and we all have moods too.
Well,
Well, thank you so much, Mark. And
Well, thank you. Thank you for
I think
being
I'm
here.
on next month, and I'm looking forward
That's
to that.
right. Yes, Ravi is one of our featured readers for next
Yay.
month. Let me actually just give a full shout out.
Speaking of conveners,
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah,
We have readings coming up on the 14th, and I think, I forget, the 9th. I'm gonna look in a minute.
yeah. I'm looking as we speak. Oh, I'm accidentally looking at the workshop list, of course.
If
So
yeah.
We're
on
working, Mark.
Sunday, June 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern, our featured poets will be Barbara Crooker, Robbie Nestor, Judy Cronenfeld, and Kathleen Cohen.
What a great group of people to feature with. That's wonderful. What a great choice. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
So-
Yeah, I try to work hard on the lineups. Go ahead.
So my reading coming up, my readings that I'm hosting are the 10th and the 14th. The 10th for the verse virtual reading. Gosh, I don't remember who it is. It's Virginia Conchin, but somebody else. Virginia Conchin and John E. Vincent, and an open mic. And the sign up is on the Verse Virtual 2025 website and on my Facebook. And the Words with You is the 14th. And that is, I'm sorry, I didn't have it up here. Sometimes all of my open things clog up the computer, so I try not to do that. So it's Kika Dorsey and Joe Fasano on the
Oh
14th.
yes, I saw you have just
And I
saw
just signed up for next year, next fall, I signed up Ross Gay and a
Whoa.
friend of his. Yeah.
Wow.
So we got some great readings coming
Wow.
up if we should live so long.
Oh, goodness. So let's talk for anyone who can hang out for a minute. Let's talk a little about what feels needed in the literary community and arts community. What's desired? What would you like to see more of? What would help?
Well, I think you're doing everything right. I think you're doing everything you need. Sometimes it does get a little bit too much for me because I have like 1,000 emails a day from political stuff coming through. And my cousin has to leave the country because she never became an American citizen. And of course she's
Mm.
British, and she's white, but these days it doesn't matter. So she
Said
has to leave.
something.
She has to leave,
Mm,
and
unbelievable.
and I have other cousins. I have one in Canada that I'm worried about if Trump goes ahead and with his plans, then nothing is safe
One
between.
art has tons of Canadian poets I speak with often and, try to be an apologist about, and we should be punished for our poor decisions. I've been sad, to hear from all the international folks that I talk with that, it really does. They said you guys voted for this guy twice, and a good percentage of your country did vote for this
Not
person to
big.
be in charge, right? But that internationally there is that image that we have elected, we have made this choice, and so we're all sort of, we're all caught up in it by association, which does not feel good. Dick, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to your question about, as you know, the poetry community.
Yeah.
And I think the work that, three journals were in the same breath. There's One Art, there's Only Poems, there's Rattle. I'm sure there are more who are putting a lot of energy into um, becoming more and more public, to publicizing what they're doing. And it might feel a little self-serving. I just want One Art to be, a greater presence in the community. But I think putting energy into that is such a gift. And poetry, we wouldn't be here if we didn't think poetry was important. And if it's that important, then we would all put even as much energy as you're putting into it, in becoming more public, publishing. I don't know exactly how to use the roots of the words, but the work that you three journals are doing to extract poetry from the effete activity that it is and make it known to the public that it's people's work. It always has been. I just admire that, and I hope that we all can support those of you who are putting energy into it with both our work but also resources.
Thank you, Dick. I do see so many curators and people who run journals who do amazing amounts of work, and so I'm floored by what they're doing all the time.
Well,
Don, I see.
I think it's a um, we do our work, we congratulate each other, we like each other's work, we admire it, we learn from each other. It's a wonderful community. I am so, in these last 4 years of me publishing, I've felt such a gift of being part of the community. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about the greater gift of making what poets do find its way back into the larger public sphere as it has been in so many other healthy resistance movements.
True.
I want to redouble my effort in leading workshops, which takes up a huge amount of my time already. But I just, I feel like if we can empower more people to go out and say what they need to say and be present in their communities and feel the power of their own voice. My workshop effort, though it wears me out, I'm redoubling it. And we talked about one, and it's, can I say, Terri, it was your work that gave me an idea for this workshop that I've been talking to Mark about.
Yeah.
Because you have a way of observing people in the world that is so utterly wonderful without making yourself the heroine.
Thank you, Donna. I really admire your work as well, and you. You're such a generous spirit in the poetry community.
Well, everyone present here is so beloved, and the work is so wonderful. But I just noticed that I see in the workshops that I regularly teach that people don't always have the skill to observe without putting themselves in the spotlight as being cool enough to observe in the right way. No.
I know exactly what you mean.
So I'm a fan of everybody who read today. And Kai, I was in the James Cruz workshop when you read that poem. And
That's the first time I read it to an audience.
and
I love everything James does.
well, so do I.
Yeah, I think many of us are in that camp of just huge
I have
James
to
Cruz
say,
stands.
Yeah.
reading I became a fan of James Cruz because I kept using his poems in my workshops. And then finally I thought, I got to see who in the heck this guy is. So we began a correspondence, which has, led to feeling really close to him. His book of essays, I think it's How to Love the World, where he writes an essay about, of all the self-help books that I've, read back when I used to read those, none of them ever made any difference. I was always, just grouchy person that I was. But reading that book, I just honestly changed the way I move through the world for the better. Even though I still
Great.
dress
I have
like
it on my shelf. I
somebody.
got to read it.
Oh, it is super good.
It's in my
Still
huge
look
stack
like,
of things to read, how we
I wear
do.
this sweatshirt when I'm on a plane that says, if you talk to me, you'll be sorry kind of thing with, an eye mask and headphones and oh, yeah, hold up those books.
It's just a stack of James's books
Yes,
and the
the
poetry of
one with
presence
the
books.
essays is the one. I mean, I've got them all too, but the essay one. But his way of going through the world and being like a, humankind, human being.
Yeah.
I decided I'm going to try this.
Well, he's a good example.
Honestly changed my life. Now, it's just really changed everything.
Jennifer, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm going to switch the subject a little bit from James. Going back to what someone was saying about, I think it was you, Dick, who was mentioning, opening the way for people to share their voice around poems or beyond. I work with young people. Mark, you know this. I'm always talking about this on Substack with you. It is, and Kai, you mentioned my kids, so I use that term too. It's so important to me because I don't have kids, but I think of them as my kids. And I just like sharing with them poems since they're so terrified of poetry and they're terrified of speaking. I mean, we're on Zoom, but to get them to come forward and just share anything, it's my mission in life. But I wonder, Mark, and I know you are so busy anyway, but I wonder if there's a format, and I would be happy to help if for young poets to contribute to One Art, or if you've got some kind of area to highlight young poets in the One Art community. I've volunteered to be a guest reader. I don't know if you could use support around that, but if you can always open it up to your community and say, guest readers are welcome for anyone who's previously published. If you want to explore the young artist, young poet venue in any way, shape, or form, please call on me. But I think opening poetry up for younger people is so important, so that it becomes sort of a whole world they can share and enjoy from an earlier stage before they become too cool.
That is really interesting, and I agree. It's really important to highlight young voices. I have seen firsthand, you know, people who are not of age to vote still have very valuable insights about culture and what's going on in the world, and how it's affecting them. And many of them are very good writers. Shout out to the large number of children who submit work to me from specifically Manila. I'm not sure what's going
Wow.
on with the education system there, but there's an alarming number of very bright, they're just really good at articulating themselves. I will say, in a more official capacity for doing that, I know it's a little tricky. In theory, you're supposed to get parental consent for having people underage do work. I was sort of generally trained in the, do the thing and, apologize later if it's an issue. But yeah, it gets a little tricky if we integrate sort of like a specifically young poets sort of division or imprint or something, or just like a section for youth writers. Though I do find it appealing. It's kind of I know it's an interesting conversation for a lot of reasons, but I just behind the scenes had a conversation. I guess I shouldn't name names, but I do know that a well-known journal has stopped doing their young poets thing that they do. And there are some complicated reasons behind that. So I'm not sure if it's somehow getting harder, or there's an issue with the amount of work submitted or diversity, or my understanding is there are some issues with the caliber of the work, which actually surprised me. But yeah, I mean, I'm all about including the youth vote. I think it's important.
I hope it's not the Rattle Young Poets anthology, because that's always a treat. That's always a real treat when it comes across my desk. One of the a little friendly amendment, Donna, to what you were saying about the self-centered poetry. This is very difficult for me because I'm such a judgmental guy. But you go to an open mic poetry reading, and as most of us know, half the poems are, sort of, you would not recognize as well crafted, or anybody who's really fully, tried to develop a, poetic craft. But yet there's something about people's urge to leave white space on a page, to call what they're doing poetry. I mean, this is an ancient urge, and these people who are reading these crappy poems at poetry readings are reading poems. They felt this urge to express themselves in this way, and while I am incapable of fully embracing it, I realize it's a good thing that folks have decided in some way to not take up the full space that's given them by, by using a poetic form. I don't know what that's about, but I think it's worth us, at least me, being more appreciative of.
We respect constraints.
I absolutely want everybody to write and express themselves. I I guess because I lead pretty advanced poetry workshops in my, Occasionally, somebody's been on the waiting list for a really long time. I end up letting them in. And it is very hard sometimes for someone to make the jump. And I often find that that leap that they are capable of making and want so much to make is really around how to observe the world, report on what they observe without coming from a place of like Lady Bountiful or whatever, of, I am in, the position to, without just saying what is happening and letting the scene speak for itself. So this is, I know, a very tricky thing, and it's an advanced thing, but I feel like it's necessary if the poems are going to be really, really first rate. That's all.
Yeah, I always think of this concept that I talk about a lot that I'm just stealing off of James Longenbach, but he had this great line in an interview about how it's actually really hard and takes a very long time for poets to sound like themselves on the page, and that really rang as very, very true. That like it seems
Yes.
like we should be able to just sort of project our natural cadence and our voice and our tone and our style onto the page and make it look easy, but that just isn't the reality. Like people talk about, like the sort of like head to arm to pen to page, and like, or just like head to keyboard, or even if you record your poetry, the sort of thought to audio, there's still a lot of sort of noise that's in there, and we just lose a lot of it in the transmission, which is really interesting. But it's very human, which is an important point of why AI can't really fully win this battle. Is Our limitations are our greatest asset.
Nathaniel keeps peeking in to see if I'm still talking.
Have
Yeah.
fun, everybody. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Kat,
Sure.
for being with us.
Thank
It's a
you.
great pleasure.
Great.
Bye. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
And Mark, thank you so much for convening the space and inviting, I'll say me, but inviting all of us to get to read together and hold our poems in contact with each other.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm going to stop the recording.